Folks, welcome back. Just heading out to the sawmill here. My resident deer are waiting for me. I'm not sure if you can see them down there. Sort of see the legs. This one's actually walking towards me. It's a doe with two fawns that have been hanging out for quite some time. Here it comes. It's kind of funny, you don't often see deer coming to approach you. There it is, just getting a good look. Anyways, we'll head down there. Set up here. There she is. Oh. She knows I don't hurt her, so that's why she's probably not too concerned. Now that we stopped at the sawmill, I can see one of the fawns. See it there? Oh, there's two. The one in the back is real small. You see him there? I'll try to zoom in with the video, but that both those can't be any bigger than a small dog, that's for sure. I can see the spots on them still. One of the good things about thinning is you open up the canopy to sunlight, you get all kinds of new tree species and other shrubs and that coming in, and then the deer will come through and they'll forage. And anyways, they know I'm not out here to bother them, so I'm going to continue on my way here. Now, getting back to what I wanted to talk about in today's video, it comes down to whether I'm still happy with a trailer sawmill, a sawmill like this up on wheels, or whether I wish I could go back to my old setup, which was a very similar setup, but without the wheels, without the trailer. The big difference I'm noticing here between a trailered sawmill like this and the other one is working height. Now, for years, many of you told me that, Sandy, your working height on that old sawmill was too low. And I used to tell everyone, you know what, I still like it nice and low. I can manipulate the log. I can step over the sawmill bed. I can do everything I need to because it's nice and low quite easily. Well, I'll be the first one to say that I was wrong. This thing here, the sawmill on the trailer, this thing makes a world of difference. I really like the working height higher. Now, up until now, as I said, I could get away with getting down, bending down, picking things up, adjusting the log stops, log clamps, stepping over the sawmill without issue. Well, once it's up higher, all those things become just a little bit easier. That is, of course, unless you drop your tape measure down there and it bounces on the other side of the sawmill. But everything else is pretty easy at this height. With the jacks, I can adjust it, level it a little bit easier than the adjustable legs on the stationary model. Now, I could make my stationary model this high if I put blocks, concrete maybe, wood, but I find the mobility adds to the nice working height and makes it one of the reasons that I would prefer a trailered version as opposed to the stationary version. Now, the reason the mobility is nice is after you get sawing for a little while, you're gonna have a heck of a lot of sawdust that builds up, and it really doesn't take long, trust me. And when you have a stationary model and it's low to the ground, well, it's going to start to affect your sawmill rolling on the bed, especially if you let it mound up nice and high. Well, that can become an issue. The other issue is it's not easy to get that mound of sawdust out of there if you can't simply hook up to it like I can with a piece of equipment and roll the sawmill out of the way. If you have to dig in between all of these bunks to get the sawdust out, the debris out, well, that can become a little bit onerous. Now, it can be especially onerous when you don't have a shelter over your sawmill, because that sawdust gets pretty wet, gets pretty heavy, And then something like a backpack blower won't clear it out of the way very easily. And so that's why I like it nice and high. I like it on wheels. When things get built up, I just move the sawmill and then I come through and clear it out of the way. Now, the other reason I like a sawmill up on the trailer as opposed to the old version I had where it was down on the ground is because the odd time if I do get the opportunity to go and saw some lumber and it's not here on my property, I don't have to pass it up. If you've ever tried moving a sawmill, a stationary sawmill like I've tried, well, just know you're in for a bit of a treat and not a good one. I tried moving my stationary sawmill one time so I could do a little bit of work on my shed. Well, that was a bit of an effort. You pretty much have to take the sawmill bed apart somewhere at the halfway mark. That is, of course, if you've got heavy equipment. And then you have to lift the pieces separately. And then you have to lift off the saw head. It's a huge effort and it does require some disassembly. And not to mention when you get it put back together, you got to make sure everything's nice and flat again. So that whole episode turned me completely off of mobility of a stationary sawmill, at least not often. Moving this is a breeze. As I said, you lift things up, the jacks that is, you take the saw head, you pin it in place. That's what these are for pins. And they pin down here, by the way. One there on either side of the axle. And then you can take it out to the road and then hook it to your vehicle. This unit's got lights and away I go. So that's kind of a nice thing. Now, on the contrary, something that isn't quite as nice, especially for those of you who don't have heavy equipment, is the height. If you're going to try to lift heavy logs up here without some form of heavy equipment like a tractor or skid steer, well, it's going to be an effort. Now, there are log loading ramps that you can use a hand winch to pull things up with. Those do work, but as you can imagine, the higher the sawmill gets from the ground, the more effort will be required to get it up there onto the sawmill. When I had things nice and low, it was no problem to roll things up there just with some little makeshift ramps. In fact, I could just use a cant hook and get it up there. Now, let's assume you were planning on selling your mobile sawmill, a sawmill on a trailer. It is probably going to be just a little bit easier to find a buyer who's willing to take on this sawmill because there's no disassembly, there's no reassembly to get down to sawing. If someone likes this, after looking at it, they pay you, they hook their vehicle to it, they take it to their home, jack it up, get it level, and they're good to go sawing. Now, if they're a stationary unit, you're going to have to disassemble it to some extent. Maybe take the track, disassemble it into two pieces. Then you're going to have heavy equipment to lift those pieces into someone's trailer, unless you can lift them. And then you'll also have to have heavy equipment to lift up the saw head, load it into someone's trailer or truck. They haul it to their house, reassemble, realign, put the head back on the track, and get down to sawing. That is a bit of an extra step. When I sold my original sawmill, my stationary sawmill, the person I sold it to had no problem doing that because they had the heavy equipment and the help at home. But if someone doesn't, they might be more inclined to buy a sawmill on a trailer. Now, getting back to the trailer here, the trailer does have differences. It has these jacks as well as the hub and the wheel, which stick out. Now, on a stationary model of this, those aren't there. And so you can get a little bit tighter when you're walking to the edge of the sawmill. When I'm walking, I don't find it that big of a deal. If you look at where the handle is lined, I pretty much walk in that direction. And so I've just trained myself to walk on the outside of these jacks. But I'm not going to lie, you get moving along and you forget what you're doing. I have hit my knee a time or two off these jacks, and well, that hurts. On this trailer, I do find it a bit challenging to put fuel in it. If I raise it up to the point where the fuel cap is right about here, the trouble with that is, look where I'm standing. It's difficult for me to hold 20 liters of fuel up that high to dump it in there. Now, I have seen all kinds of little electronic or hand pumps to pump fuel up there. I don't have any of them, so I'm back to the old jerry can. That can be about problematic. If I drop the sawmill down, it puts the gas cap right here, which is still an issue because I can't get access as easily. Now, I have tried to get in this direction, but as you can see, the slant here is a bit challenging. And so what I often end up doing is I push the sawmill ahead a little bit. I put a board which rests on the rails, and then I can stand up there in order to get my fuel filled. Now, I try not to do that too often, especially in the winter because it's slippery. In that case, I get a little bit of a step stool and fill it up. Likewise, if I'm going to fill the lubrication tank, it's way up there. And so what I have to do is get something to stand on to fill it. when I had my sawmill, which was down on the ground, it was a little bit easier to fill the fuel and the lube tank. Now, one last thought about trailer version versus a stationary version. If you at all think you're going to move the sawmill ever, I would suggest getting a trailered version. Now, you can build a real nice shed, a nice concrete pad that's level, and you can put a stationary unit on it and it never moves. In that case, then yeah, probably a trailered version wouldn't be something that you're going to invest your money in, because the trailered version is more money than the stationary version. So maybe you'd save a few bucks there. But if you're going to have your sawmill, it's going to be moving around periodically, maybe even for cleaning, then the trailered version is definitely something you want to consider, in my opinion.